Welcome, 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 welcome to those of you who are listening to the replay. Welcome as well. My name is Wendy Sachs, and I'm a member of the board of Plant-Powered Metro New York. And it's October. It's autumn, at least here in New York. Welcome to our monthly series, Cooking with Chef Carole, presented by Plant-Powered Metro New York. Plant-Powered Metro New York empowers people to achieve better health and overcome chronic disease through whole food, plant-based nutrition. Together with a wide range of grassroots leaders, organizers, and educators, we raise awareness about the dramatic health benefits of whole food, plant-based diets and nutrition. We offer education and build supportive communities that empower people to make lifestyle adjustments, organize and lead projects that spark changes to food policy, food practice, and food culture. So I have a bunch of announcements because the good news is here at Plant-Powered Metro, we have been growing and we have more and more educators and more people coming on board. So get your calendars out. But again, a warm welcome to those of you who are watching the replay. I just realized I skipped a section, so I'll get to the announcements in a moment. But anyway, it's October. Kale, beets, lettuces, eggplants, garlic, tomatoes, and squashes of all kinds are abundant at the farmers markets here. And of course, pumpkins in time for Halloween. So I hope you avail yourself of the delicious autumn variety and the spooky treats which Carole will be showing us today. As usual, we encourage you all, if possible, to buy organic and even regenerative ingredients to the best of your abilities. Ask for regenerative vegetables at your local markets because the quality of the soil makes a difference to your health and supports local farmers. It makes a difference in regulating climate change. It's one of the few things we can do for climate. And of course, we encourage you to participate in your local CSAs, which is community-supported agriculture. So here are the announcements. I'm going to run by them quickly because I'll mention them at the end also. This Thursday, October 27th, Fiesta Bowl Mexicano. By the way, these are our in-person events, which we're really excited to start announcing and having again, at least here in the city and other parts of the city. This is a cooking demonstration in Spanish by Marielle Painter, and it looks delicious. We're also having an event on plant-based nutrition for polycystic ovarian syndrome with a nutritionist and American lifestyle medicine professional, Rohini Behakal, on Friday at 5 in, I think that's in East Harlem, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, the information's on the website. And lo and behold, for those of you here in the city, a very, 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 very special treat because our own Chef Carole is going to be in New York on Monday, October 23rd. There's a very special event from 12:30 till 2:30. It's a lunchtime event. Called Women's Wellness Salon, Nutrition for Hormonal Health, plus this plant-powered cooking demo and tasting by our beloved Chef Carole. So please come and join us on the day of Halloween, but daytime. And the events are, the details are on the website. Please register. We also have an in-person event, a Vietnamese dinner social, a fall feast on Thursday, November 3rd at 6:30 in Astoria. And in the East Village, Caravan of Dreams, we're also having a fall social on Wednesday, November 16th at 6:30 in the East Village. So I'll announce all that in the towards the end, and I'll also at the end list our online events, which are, again, full of information on inflammation. We have a book club discussion coming up on diabetes next month, and our virtual jumpstart will start next January, but we'll be posting events in details on that sort of in around November. So guidelines for today, please let us know where you're from in the chat. Also, please ask questions in the chat. Carol and I usually allow time during her demo, but if not, we'll try to save a few minutes at the end for questions, and we'll answer as many as possible. And if you're enjoying the presentation, please like us on Facebook and YouTube. And to those listening later, welcome. So, quick fun facts. I know for sure Carol is going to be using one of my most favorite thing in the world, which is sesame seeds and tahini, which is a paste made from sesame seeds. So from Dr. Furman's book on food, we have that sesame is one of the oldest plants cultivated by humans. It's believed to have originated in India and Africa, and it's now, of course, grown all over the world, and it's been found in archaeological excavations as far back as 3,500 to 3,050 BC. And tahini paste, which we'll be using today, is made from ground sesame seeds, and sesame seeds have a host of all kinds of essential minerals, and you can find out more in Dr. Furman's lovely book. So, Carol, enough of me. What's on the menu today?
Oh my God, Wendy, I have 3 things to say right away. I'm going to try to keep them in the correct order. One, I just want to clarify that my in-person demo is Halloween Day, just like you said, Halloween Day. But earlier in the sentences it said October 23rd. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands in person about women's health at the Alchemy Salon is on Halloween Day, and it's a lunchtime event. So it's, I believe, 12:30 to 2:30, and you have to register for the event. You can't just show up because we need to know how many people are coming because it's in person. The second thing I want to tell you about is I too have Dr. Furman's sesame seed right open here because it is pretty fascinating because I eat so many seeds. Sometimes I think everything I put seeds on are just the vehicle for so I can eat the seeds. But it's so interesting because they are so special. They're a little tiny gold mine of health benefits, is what Dr. Furman says, and are an excellent source of essential minerals, calcium, iron, magnesium, selenium, and copper, and it's even linked to helping breast cancer. So just think, amazing, these tiny little gems are really, really healthy for us. So I'm kind of excited about using them and showing you a dessert today. And the third thing on my mind before I tell you about the menu is that we do talk about spooky treats. And I want to tell you that I'm very inspired by Halloween. I love this time of year very, very much. And when I wasn't a vegan and I was just vegetarian and I was cooking with butter and sugar, I used to love making witches and bats and all sorts of fun foods. And when I went to look up kind of like, what are vegan spooky treats? What does that really mean? Like, does that mean like cut fingers and clementines that are made into pumpkins? And as I was looking at recipes online, just to kind of inspire myself, I thought to myself, this is not who I am. I'm not a person that plays with food. My grandmother, I think, would hit me on my hand if I was like trying to rearrange and play with my food when I was a child. And so I really want to tell you that I don't know if I'm making any spooky treats today, but I am totally inspired by the fall. And we're going to talk about squashes a little bit and pumpkins. And we're going to definitely make really fun black cookies but the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make black bean soup. So it's that time of year when having a pot of soup, having a pot of beans on the stove is almost essential. So that's where we're starting, is with the soup. And we will get to the cookies, and then we will get to the squash. And as you mentioned, Wendy, it's helpful for people to have a dialogue with you in the chat box, but we will get to all the questions, and I'll try to address everything in a timely fashion with you. So let's get started here, and I'm going to put the burner on. I'm starting with my soup pot. It is a big, heavy cast iron Le Creuset pot. I think many of you know it's kind of my very favorite pot. I've had it almost my whole life, and I love it very much. And then we are going to need certain things, and the main ingredient here is the black beans, right? Now, if you want, you can use the canned black beans. And if you were to use the canned black beans, I would probably use 2 cans at least, maybe even 3 cans. Each can has about 1.5 cups. But what I did was, I'm going to go back here and just get them for you, is I soaked beans. I took 2 cups of dried beans, which is basically a pound. And that's usually how you buy them. And I soaked them overnight so that they would be softened. And I like doing it overnight. If you're in a hurry for beans, well, if you have an Instapot, that will speed things up, or a pressure cooker. I don't have either one of those things. So when I am in a hurry, I just take the beans, the dried beans, and I boil water, and then I cover it. And that kind of helps speed the process of the beans softening. But right now, I did soak overnight, and then I cook them today, and they're still, after soaking them in the water overnight, I pour off that water, and I put clean water for them to cook in. People ask me that question a lot, so I just want to make that clear. I pour off the water, and then I put clean water, and then I cook them. And you want to cook them until they are really soft, till they are done. You never ever want to eat beans al dente. I think I've said this a million times, but I say it again and again. You can eat pasta, you can eat your vegetables al dente, but beans, you really want to cook them through. And a lot of people don't cook them long enough. So I just want to make sure that you do that. So these for now is just these beans. I just want to show you I have them. And they are eventually going to go in the pot. But what we're going to do first is get the pot hot. Now, I'm kind of making a teeny bit spicy, okay? Because that's the way I like my black bean soup. But you are welcome to cut back anywhere. And where would you cut back? Because the list of ingredients are basically onions and garlic. And I use a serrano chili. You could use a jalapeno chili, or you could skip the chili altogether. If you even had an adobo sauce, you could put a little adobo. There's a lot of room for kind of navigating this black bean soup. I feel like it's a soup that you kind of can make your own, yet you need a few key ingredients. So let's just see if the pot is hot. The reason we're starting with the soup right away is because it's going to have to cook, and we only have a little over an hour together, and cookies are going to take time. Everything takes time, and we are trying to do as many things as possible here. So I chopped up 1 onion, and I just roughly chopped it. And you're going to see at the end that you could have this soup chunky if you like it chunky. I got out my immersion blender, and we're going to puree just a little bit of it so it's semi-chunky, semi-smooth. And the next ingredients that are going to go in there is, it says that we need 4 cloves of garlic. And I just left 1 clove of garlic here on my counter because I have this particular head of garlic had really big fat cloves of garlic. So it's almost like 2 cloves of garlic in one. So we talk about this a little bit, to kind of learn to recognize what a kind of medium-sized garlic clove is. So that way, if you have a really big one, you know maybe that's 2 in 1. Or if you have a bunch of little ones, maybe you need 3 little ones to make a big one. So I have chopped up the garlic already, and I've chopped up the serrano chili. Now again, if you didn't want to have the serrano chili, it's okay. So we're going to do what, I haven't done anything here but throw the onions in. And we haven't even put any liquid in, just the water to see if the pan was hot. And the onions are already creating their own moisture in here because they have their own natural sugars, and but they're not even sticking to the pan. It's incredible. But I do have a little bit of stock here, and it says ultimately we're going to need 4 to 5 cups. It just depends on how thick you like the soup. So I always have a little bit more. I have a little bit of vegetable stock, not quite a quart. A quart would be 4 cups. And so we'll probably need some water. And I'm probably going to just use some of the bean water, which is just fine. But let me get a little bit of this broth in here so that we are what we call water or broth sauteing. We're not using any oil here. And if you really wanted your onions to get brown, they would eventually get brown. People think that you need oil to get the onions brown, but you don't. You just have to be patient and let them slowly release their juices and their sugars, and they will become brown. But we're just looking for the onions at the moment to become translucent. Okay, that's all we're looking for. And I'm going to put the garlic and the jalapeno in there right away. And we're just going to get that here. And we're just going to mix that around. Now, the other things that I cut up is I cut up some green pepper. I cut up a carrot, probably, honestly, I cut up 3 carrots. And again, it says 1 large carrot. It says 1 celery stalk. But a 1 large carrot usually is like 12, good 12 inches sometimes. My carrots were actually from a farmer's market, and they were little tiny carrots, like 5 or 6 inches. So I actually cut up two or 3 of those because they were small. And then I cut up celery, and then I cut up 1 diced green pepper. You could use red pepper if you want, but I think the green pepper is actually a different flavor, and I actually really like it in the soup. And then the spices that we're going to use, we're going to have 1 teaspoon of oregano, 1 teaspoon of cumin, and I'm using 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika. So I'm going to get the vegetables in there now. All at one time, those vegetables are going to go in. And I left the limes here. I'll maybe move them over here once we get done with this particular tray. I just wanted to have the limes because I always forget that we need that to finish off the soup. And then 1 bay leaf is going to go right in there. And that bay leaf will have to come out before we use the immersion blender because we don't want the bay leaf to get all brown. So we're just mixing this, and I can just show you, it's a little hot, but I can just show you what that looks like. You can see that it's all sweating at the moment. And very, looking good already. I could just eat that practically. And then we're going to put our spices, and I mentioned their cumin, smoked paprika, and oregano, and that's going to go in there. And I usually like to rub the oregano in my hands like this, so they're a little big. And this time I'm using the Mexican oregano. We've talked about this before, that there are 2 kinds of oregano. There's a regular oregano and there's a Mexican one. So if you don't have the Mexican one, for this it's just fine to use the regular one, no problem. But you definitely want to use oregano. I think that makes it a nice flavor. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we have our beans, right? And we have a lot of them. And I'm going to kind of try to see if I can do this all at one time here. I'm going to just basically, I need to get another spoon. Let me just get the spoon from here. And I'm just going to gather these beans. I'm not going to use all this water. I said that. And I'm using all the beans. They're all going to go in here. Now again, these beans are totally cooked. So like I said, it's fine if you need to use the canned beans. When you're buying the canned beans, try to buy them on sale. Seems that every store has canned sales where they're just so inexpensive. And then you always want to look for the ones that are no salt. There are plenty of brands out there that are no salt. You just have to read the label. And we talk about not eating salt and not bringing home the salt in your foods. If you have to have a little bit of salt because you're someone that just is so accustomed to it, I used to be one of those people, that you just have to sprinkle a little bit of salt. but technically we're only supposed to have 2,000 grams of salt a day. And if you're having high blood pressure for any reason, you actually have to have much less, like 1,500 grams a day, which is less than a teaspoon of salt. So I always encourage people to try to bring home the food without the salt. And then if you have to add the salt later on, then you add it. And I just had a bean go flying out of the pot. Now I'm going to get this and I'm going to put the liquid here. And I'm just going to use all of this. Now this is almost 4 cups, but not quite 4 cups. So what I'm going to do is, we've gotten all these beans out. Maybe there's just a very few at the bottom. I'm not quite sure. And let's just see. I'm going to get my ladle. That is a cup. My 1 cup ladle. And I'm going to put a cup of this juice right into there. And I'm going to put even an extra cup because it's totally full. And what I'm going to do is we're going to just cook this, and it's going to cook during our demo because we need it to all the flavors meld together. And I'm actually putting in 1 more. So up until now I've put in 6 cups of liquid. And again, I like to always have extra liquid in case we need. So that is our soup. Now, because we're in a little bit of a crunch time for time, and usually soup takes a good 45 minutes to an hour to cook, I'm going to put the lid on this to get it so that it starts to boil, and then we'll lower it to a simmer. But we really need that to come to a boil, and that is the beginnings of our soup. Now we are going to eventually, we can put some cilantro in it as a finishing. We're going to put some limes in it as well. And I make a suggestion that we can put cashew cream, but we'll get to the end when we're finishing it. But for now, I just wanted to, cook, bring it up to the boil, and really start cooking. And then I'm going to use my immersion blender to give it a little puree because I like it chunky, but I don't like it totally chunky. And that's all a preference to you. You can also pour it into a blender and blend it till it's chunky there, kind of chunky and smooth. But I particularly like the immersion blender because I'm not a fan of taking hot soup out of a pot and putting it in the blender. Too many times have I had it gone flying up to the ceiling or onto the walls, and I just have learned to use the immersion blender. But for sure, if you don't have one, the blender is just perfect. So let's just move this out of the way so we can move on to making our cookies, because that's pretty, we don't do much baking on the shows here, but it is something that I do a lot of. And so I'm really excited when I'm able to do a little bit of baking. I'd like to remind, yes, and before we get on to baking, Wendy, I was going to say, are there any questions about the soup?
Indeed, there are. So you've been asked, how long do you cook your black beans prior to making the soup? So after you've soaked them, how long do you cook them?
I wrote on the directions, I think I wrote that you need at least an hour to cook them. They need at least, if you're cooking them on the stove, I don't know how long in a pressure cooker or an Instapot, it would be probably much faster, but you have to have them soaked for them to cook less time. If you could just put the beans on and put a fire under them, but they're going to take much longer, several hours.
Mm-hmm. I think to also just expand on what Carole said, you can look it up online. You'll see different people do different things, but most people soak their beans for a good 8 hours, which is usually overnight, and then around I've heard 2 hours. Carole might do 1 hour because I know she soaks her beans really for a long time. Also on that, do you leave your soaking beans on the counter or do you put them in the refrigerator?
Oh, I definitely leave them on the stove. Like, I have a whole routine. Like, beans and I have a relationship, Wendy, just like you and I have a relationship. Like, and we've talked about, like, I could have a bean show every week practically, but it's something I love so much. So in my routine with the beans literally is, oh, it's time to go to sleep, Carol. What do you need to do? Oh, well, you definitely need to get out of your clothes and your pajamas, brush your teeth, wash your face. But, oh, what's on the stove? What is there beans on the stove? So it's kind of like and sometimes I think, oh, do I have breakfast? Do I have overnight oats? Are they in the refrigerator? You know, so these are two things that I think of almost daily. Do I need to put beans on for the next day? So, and it's something that I put them right into the pot. You could put them in a bowl, but I put them literally right onto the stove. Just let them sit. You can put them on your counter. If you don't want them on your counter, you could put them in the fridge, but there's no reason to put them in the fridge.
And do you cover them when they're soaking, or do you leave them uncovered?
I often put just a plate or a lid on top just so dust isn't going on. I don't know what dust is coming from the air. It's not essential, but I just automatically just put the lid on because I just think, oh, by the time I get back to these beans, maybe dust particles are happening in the air. And especially where I live now. I mean, in New York City, I used to think dirt was always everywhere. And here I think sand is everywhere. So I don't know. I do definitely put either a plate or a cover onto them. And the real thing I definitely do is rinse them after they've been soaking and put new clean water on top. And you always want to cover them, I don't know, like 2 inches above. You want to cover, so you don't want to just cover them with just water to cover the beans. You want at least 2 inches of water above the beans.
Yes, right. And for those who are new to cooking beans, make sure when you're boiling them, there will be a lot of foam at the top. That's all the starch from the beans. So you want to spoon it off. And then, as Carol said,
and it will be like foam. It will look like foam that Wendy's talking about. And you just literally take your spoon and take it off the top if that's happening. Not all beans do give you that foam. A lot of lentil beans give you foam, which is one of the reasons to rinse them before you put them in the pot. Great. But I think that answers that question.
And then a question about your Le Creuset pan, which is how many quarts does your pan hold?
I think that, I haven't measured in it a long time, but I'm guessing it's a 6-quart pot. This particular Le Creuset, I don't know if they make it anymore, but I think they do. I mean, this I've had since college, Wendy. Like, it was an investment when I was really young, but I've had it for, 30 years, this one pot. I've burned it many, many, many times. I mean, scorched it, like, thought that I've killed the pan, and I've always managed to clean it. This one is called a soup pot. It is not a traditional Dutch oven. A traditional Dutch oven actually goes straight up and down. I have one of those too, actually. But this is a little bit of roundness to it. And it's specifically a soup pot. It doesn't mean that I don't make a lot of other things in it. It's just that it is a soup pot. And any Le Creuset is an investment. I will, if you're brand new to cooking and you don't want to spend the money, then don't. You could actually get a Lodge cast iron pot, Lodge, Lodge, for like $80. Literally. For like $80, you can have a Lodge pot. But if I had to say which is my favorite, it is the Le Creuset.
Beautiful. I think that's it. We're ready to move on.
That's it? Okay, well, I'm going to try to not mix savory foods with, let me just get a little bowl here. I'm going to try not to mix savory foods with desserts. I usually do a big cleanup, actually. And let's just take 1 minute, just even though it's a distraction and we haven't talked about anything about pumpkins yet. But I do have pumpkins in the oven, and I only have one oven, actually. I wish I had 2 ovens, but I don't. And let's just see what's happening in the oven, because I kind of want to know. And I want to make sure nothing's burning. So let's just check it out. So later on, we're going to talk about different kinds of squashes. And what I have here right now is I have delicata squash and spaghetti squash. and they're upside down. And when we talk later about squashes, I'll explain to you how do you cut them, do you take out the seeds, what do you do? But right now, all I want to see is what's happening. What is happening? So here, this is what these look like at the moment. This has another few minutes of cooking. And the other thing that I do is it's like a potato, really, or a beet. When you poke it, it should, so this is getting done, actually. This is almost done. And this is a spaghetti squash. I like it to be a little more golden, so I'm going to flip it back over, actually. And we're just going to let it cook a little bit more. It might not end up as golden as I like it to be, because we actually need to cook the cookies at 350 degrees, and my current oven is at 400 degrees. No, 425, actually. So this very minute, I'm going to bring the oven down to 350 so that we can at least put cookies in. Even though we like to cook the squash at the higher temperature, I'm going to bring the oven down so that while we're making the cookie dough, the oven is adjusting itself, because if I put the cookies in the 425 degree oven, they're going to just brown and cook way too fast. And we definitely don't want that. Okay, so we are going to move on, and let me just, like I said, I want to make sure that I don't have any savory things hanging about here, and that even my knife is like, I like it to be clean. The soup has already started to boil. Now again, soup does take time, so I'm just going to make sure that I'm going to try to keep it on a pretty rolling boil, only to speed it up. If I were at home without you all watching me, I would bring the soup to a boil, and then I would lower the heat to medium, and I would just let the soup cook and simmer. Not rapidly boiling, but simmer. But because we're making things faster, I'm going to let it rapidly boil and just really be careful, and I'm going to watch it. Now, this recipe is kind of a funny recipe, and how it came to me. When I transitioned, and Wendy was actually with me a lot when I was transitioning, she was encouraging me. I was a vegetarian, and it was really hard for me to kind of go just all the way and give up the dairy products. And I was a baker, and I loved sugar, and I loved butter, and but I was a vegetarian. But when I became a vegan, I really started looking and trying to figure out, how do I make dressings? How do I transition easily? And the one cookbook that really helped me, that Wendy had shared with me, was Kathy Fisher's Straight Up Food. And it's a wonderful book, and I suggest that all of you have it, because it's got very simple recipes. And I made a lot of things out of that cookbook when I was trying to figure out, how do I make a dressing without oil? How do I make a cookie without any butter or sugar? So I learned some techniques from her, which was very helpful for me, because there was no way that I was going to have a life without pies and desserts. That just wasn't going to happen. Now, I do want to tell you in preface that even though these desserts that I make now, that come from whole foods, meaning that we're using a sweet potato, and we're using banana, or applesauce, or dates. They're all the natural foods. They are still high in calories, okay? It's not something, just because it's natural doesn't mean that it's low in calories. So I always say to people, dessert is meant to be eaten occasionally, but not all the time. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. Now, back to the original recipe. When in her Straight Up food book cookbook, she has a recipe for tahini cookies made with oats, made with regular tahini, which is beige tahini, and she had one of my favorite spices in the cookie, which I talked about last time, overnight oats. When I make it, I always use cardamom. Cardamom is a really yummy spice. So when I made these cookies, I looked at the recipe, and she made it with fresh apricots, okay? So I basically took the recipe and then kind of changed it all around. So it'd be like taking the same fabric of clothes and Wendy makes a dress and then I make a pantsuit, okay? It's the same fabric, but different outfits, okay? So I kind of changed the whole thing around, but kept some of the similar, but kept most of the similar ingredients, except for I changed the beige tahini to black tahini, and then I rolled the cookies in sesame seeds because I love sesame seeds so much that, so let's start this recipe and we'll go through it and we'll go through all the ingredients. So the very first thing that I usually do is you preheat the oven to 350, which is what we've got. We've got our squashes in there at the moment, and they're just getting brown. I could have turned them over so that they were going to brown more, but they're in the oven. And then what we're going to do is we're going to line a baking sheet, and I just have a big baking sheet here, and I always line everything I do with parchment paper. Now you probably can't see, but I use this parchment paper that is natural. It's called parchment baking paper. It's called If You Care. And this is the paper. It's brown. And I actually use it for everything. When I roast vegetables, when I bake cookies, I can't even imagine not using it. Now you can also use a Silpat mat if you own one. But for some reason, I always have liked, all my years of baking have always been done on parchment paper. So I'm just going to leave this pan like this, and I think that will give us enough room to work. So we've got our pan all lined. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to have our dates. And the recipe calls for 8 ounces of dates. Now you could use the medjool dates or you could use the Deglet Noor. I actually really like buying the Deglet Noor sometimes because they're half the price of medjool dates. And in this recipe it says you need 8 ounces. So if you have a scale, you'll just pit the dates and you'll weigh them to 8 ounces, whichever kind you use. But today I used medjool dates, and it says 10 to 12 dates. If you don't have a scale, then just do approximate 10 to 12 dates. It almost always works out for the ounces, so don't worry if you don't have a scale. This is boiling so hard that I have to make sure that it's not boiling over. So that is going like crazy, and I'm standing right next to it, so it's kind of making me feel like it's really close. So I'm soaking the dates in 3/4 cup of water, and we're going to actually use that water, and we're going to, you'll see in a minute what we're going to do with the dates. And then, so we're going to pit the dates, chop the dates in 3, and we're going to let the dates sit for like 15 minutes. You can let them sit overnight if you want. Sometimes I just pit dates, put them in the water, just like you do beans, and then I put these in the refrigerator. And then when I have a moment, I actually puree them so that I have date paste. But that is just going to sit there like that. Then what we're going to do is there are 2 kinds of, there are oats in these cookies. There are oats that are old-fashioned oats, and there's 1.5 cups of old-fashioned oats that we don't grind up at all. And then there's a cup of oats that we're actually going to grind in a blender. You could blend it in your NutriBullet or your Vitamix or any kind of blender. You can even blend it in your food processor. But you want 1 cup, basically, of the flour. So I've done that back here, but I'm just going to do it a little more. Now sometimes I blend a lot of it at one time, actually, and just put it in a jar, because you can do that. And usually 1 cup of oats actually gives you exactly 1 cup of flour. And if you want to see if that's true, I did 1 cup, and it's not exact, but it's pretty close. So I'm just showing you here. This is, and I'm patting it down just a little bit, and there it is. So 1 cup of oats, and then you grind them, actually gives you 1 cup of flour. Okay, so I already have these oats in my bowl here. It's okay to have them in here like that. And then the next thing, and I just want to kind of go through it one step at a time so we don't forget anything. We're going to put all of that, and then we're going to take our spices and our powder. So this has 1 teaspoon of cardamom, which if anyone were to put me against the wall and say, what's your favorite spice? I have to say, I would say cumin and cardamom, because they are my 2 favorite spices. I always want to play that on everyone. What's your favorite spice? Tell me. And then we have 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and then we have a half a teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, so all of that is going to go in there, and like that, really simple. And I'm just going to get a little whisk. I like using a whisk to kind of get it all mixed in. And you always want to be careful. Here's a big piece of powdery baking soda. You don't want any big pieces of anything. Okay, so the whisk kind of helps break everything down. And I see 1 more little piece of baking powder. And someone wrote to me today, actually, who's from a class, and just said to me, I love sugar. How do I deal with not eating so many desserts, and how much? And I first wanted to say, well, the way to do it, honestly, if you're really addicted to sugar, is just to cut it out entirely. I think that's the best way. And then eventually maybe you can slowly introduce yourself back to some sugar, some sweetness, but have things that are natural, made from fruits and bananas and apples and all that. Because if you're someone that just feels like you can't live without the sugar, well then you're going to have to, it was kind of like me when I gave up salt. I actually really love salt, and I still love salt actually. But if you're not going to have it, you have to give your taste buds time to adjust. And it usually takes a good 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes a little bit more. 3 weeks on the safe side, pretty much. But that's about what it takes. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take I'm going to get a bigger thing for the Vitamix. I'm going to get the larger container. I have the smaller container. Not the Vitamix, the NutriBullet, because the NutriBullet has different size containers. So I did the flour in a small one. And then we're going to put these in right here. And we're going to put it in with the water. And that water is really delicious. If you're ever making date paste, I save that water when I'm just soaking dates sometimes, because it is super sweet and really delicious. Now this is really boiling, and it's looking good. But remember, the carrots have to get cooked. The beans are cooked already. And we're just going to let that kind of continue boiling like that. I'm not used to standing next to things that are rapidly boiling. Okay, now let's figure out the next things that have to go in. So we're going to take this, and this is black tahini. And maybe none of you have ever heard of black tahini. There's several different brands, but the most common that you would find on the shelf is a brand called Kevela. Kevala, and I think we have that link to share with you in case you want to see that particular brand. And you basically, what is it? These are organic, unhulled black sesame seeds. And in case you didn't know, sesame seeds come in black, which I'm not going to take out of the jar right now, and they come in beige. And I love mixing them up so they kind of look like, black and white dots, and they kind of, sometimes they're referred to as tuxedo looking because they're black and white. But that is what this tahini is made out of. It's a teeny bit expensive, but you don't use a lot. And last year at the same time, during Halloween, we made a black hummus. And last October, And if any of you want to go look for that recipe, you go back to Plant Powered Metro New York and you actually find the demo from last October, which is when we made with black chickpeas and black tahini, we made a black hummus. So it's kind of fun to play around with colors, and we always talk about eating the rainbow, but we seldom talk about the dark side of foods, the really dark side of foods. So we need a 1/4 cup, and just like any tahini, you always want to make sure that this is thoroughly stirred. So its oil likes to come to the top, and it's not so smooth right at the moment. I see lots of big chunks like this. I see lots, but look, it's quite gooey and quite beautiful. And I do want to tell you that any of you who like making tahini sauce, you should really, for salads or anything that you make tahini sauce, you should try the black tahini. It has it's still sesame seeds, but it has a wonderful taste. And you could drizzle it on top of a sweet potato. It's actually quite delicious on a sweet potato, actually. So I'm gonna spoon this in, and I need to get a 1/4 cup. And I'm using my solid measuring cup here to get a 1/4 cup. And then we're gonna get a spatula right away. So let me just get the spatula, because I like getting this cleaned off. Okay, so that's going in there. And that's all we need is a 1/4 cup of that. And it's so black. Oh, I can hear this kind of dripping the pan with moisture. Okay, so that is going in here, and I'm going to get it all out with my spatula. And this is going to get blended up into a paste. And you'll see it's going to be delicious, actually. I'm sure you could make other things with this wonderful paste because it's just dates. And I can only imagine just taking this. So what we're going to do is we're going and then we're going to put the liquid in here too. We're going to use this moment to take 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. So I'm going to get the vanilla, and I'm just going to get 1/2 teaspoon. We need 1.5 teaspoons, so we'll do that 3 times. Okay, 3. That's our vanilla. And I'm making sure I don't forget anything. I've got it all. So this now is going to get blended. And it's going to be kind of gooey, actually, because it's got just the water and the dates and the tahini. So I'm going to blend it over here. So it'll take just 1 minute. Now, I'm just giving it a little bit of a shake and blending it again. Oops. Oh. Now, it is really super thick, and I just want to make sure that it's really, really thick. And you can see it's really black. It's very black. It's going to be perfect for our cookies. You're going to see. So I'm getting that, and I'm just wanting to blend a little bit. So that should be good enough. And does anybody have any questions thus far about anything, Wendy? Is anybody chatting away there?
Yes, and yes.
So while I'm carefully cleaning this out, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to listen to your questions, Wendy, but I really want to get all this gooey stuff out, okay? That's the goal here, is to get it out of the blender.
Gooey goes along with Halloween.
But look at it's really paste-like. You see, it's very, so if you were to like kind of taste this right this minute, it would be out of this world delicious because it's sweet and it's sesame seeds paste and it's really delicious. But it's very important to get it all out of the container because this is what's going to hold your cookie together, and you really don't want to leave any of it behind.
I've made those, and it's hard to not lick your fingers in the process. But let me get to the questions. I'm jumping back to the squash. Do you peel your delicata squash before cooking?
I would like to wait for that question, but the answer is no.
Okay, great. And we can talk further about that
We're
later.
going to talk a few minutes about squash. I just want to get the cookies in, and we will talk about squash, I promise.
Fabulous. So another question is, do you just cover the dates in a bowl?
Yes, I don't even cover. I just put the dates in a bowl, and then I put the water, and I make sure that they're immersed in the water. There could be one or two kind of sticking out, right? But I don't want them sticking out. I want them to be in the water.
Do you use a specific amount of water?
Yes, in the recipe it says that you need 8 ounces of dates and that you need 3/4 cup of water. It's very specific.
Great. One of the reasons it's specific to answer the question is because it's going into a baking recipe. So if you were just making date syrup, for example, you might be a little more.
Yes, when I make like date paste, if this was dates that I was making into paste, I'd be all loosey-goosey about it. I'd be, oh, let's have a few more dates, or let's have a few less dates, and let's just pour some water on top so they're soaking. I wouldn't really care because you just make the date paste and you want it to be a nice consistency, but you can have it thicker, you can have it thinner. It really doesn't matter. But this is, as you just pointed out, Wendy, it's baking. And baking is a science. I bake every day. And I tell people, it is, if the cookie's not the same tomorrow, I'm sorry, but the weather changes, the environment is different. There are so many factors that go into baking that sometimes it's not always the same because you can't help it, you know?
Right. And this question is a little bit off topic, Carol, so I don't want to interrupt too much of what you're doing, but the conversation that came up with salt, we had a question about miso, and one of the viewers was just asking what brand of miso do you recommend? I know that you like I do, use the miso in a jar, and I think that jar is called South River. But
it is, Wendy. You remember really correctly, and you know everybody has a different opinion on on how much miso they can use or how much that they don't want to eat fermented foods for one reason or another. But there's so many studies now that talk about how good all fermented food is for you, and usually when I use miso, it is like 1 teaspoon or a half a teaspoon. And just that little teeny bit really is a game changer. And so the one that I use that I think is delicious, and they have like 12 kinds of beans that they make, but the one that I love is just like what you said, South Rivers. I don't think you can see that because the gold on the label is kind of hard on the camera, but it's just chickpea miso. It's South Rivers. I will tell you, this is a $15 jar. This is not a cheap thing, but it lasts forever. And it never spoils. And I have at least half a jar left, and I opened it. I always put the date on things when I open it. So, and I cook a lot. So this says that I opened it in April. And so, but it could last a year. It could last longer. So this is the brand I like very much. You definitely find it at natural grocery stores, and Whole Foods, I believe, has it as well. And Whole Foods is a great place to find the black tahini if you're looking for it. So I hope that answers the question. There is another brand of miso that is pretty good, actually. That is this Miso Master. It's called Miso Master. Right. And I only buy it when I can't find South Rivers.
Yes, I do the same. And also, just if you're asking about miso versus salt, for people who are concerned about salt and they've been told no salt, there's a wonderful 5-minute short video on Dr. Michael Greger's site called nutritionfacts.org, and he talks about the advantage of the fermentation in the miso versus having the half a teaspoon or whatever it is of salt that some people will add to their food. But salt and sodium is also one of those things that's worthwhile getting checked in your when you do your blood tests, because some people actually do run low sodium. So recommendation for us tends to be low salt, no salt, but do get your blood work done because it can make a difference. Okay, Carole.
And I also tell people when I'm teaching about salt, Wendy, is if you're someone like me, I will admit I love salt on everything. Chocolate chip cookies, brownies, I like salt on everything. I did. Is that the recommended amount, again, if you don't have high blood pressure, is 1 teaspoon. So put a teaspoon in a bowl on your counter, and that's all you get for the whole day. That's the salt that you have for a whole day. That is if you bring home tomato sauce with no salt, beans with no salt. It's when you're bringing it all home in these processed foods where the salt really builds up. So if you need to be low salt, then bring home the no salt food and then have that 1 teaspoon of salt on your counter where you just say, oh, I'm just going to pinch and put a little bit. And then you'll see it's fine. But there are ways of bringing up flavor, which we talk about all the time on this show, which are fresh herbs, spices, and citrus. Those are ways to bring up flavor so that you actually aren't missing that salt. So can we go back to the cooking? Are we answered all those things?
We have back to your cookies.
Okay, so I've mixed all this, Wendy. You can see it is totally sticky and gooey. And one of the things that I when I changed the recipe, I decided I wanted sesame seeds inside as well as outside. So I actually say that we should have a half a cup of sesame seeds, but I put 2 tablespoons, literally 2 tablespoons, I put inside the cookie. And then we're going to actually put sesame seeds outside the cookie. So right at this moment, we just want to get this all mixed up. And I think that the more the dough kind of sits a little bit, the better everything gets all integrated with itself. Now, again, the original recipe for Kathy, she used fresh apricots, and she cut them up and put them in with her cookies, her beige tahini, and made a totally different cookie. But I made an entirely different cookie. So let's get a bowl. That's what I like to do. I'm going to get a bowl that's like this. And we can use the beige sesame seeds. We can use black ones too, if we want. I took out black ones. And then I'm going to get the little scooper now. While we're near the oven, I did lower the temperature, but I really think that the squashes are probably done. I know that they're done. I just really wanted them to get a little browner. And they're pretty brown, but I think what I'm going to do is, I know that my back is towards you. They are definitely done, but what I'm going to do right now, because I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of orange juice on them instead of oil. And again, we're going to get to these pumpkins, I promise you that. But while I still have the oven on, and I just want them a teeny bit brown, I'm just going to keep them in the oven just for a very few more minutes. They are absolutely done. And how do I know they're done? Because I poked a fork in them. But let's just get on with the cookies. Now I'm going to get the scoop, which I didn't get out of the door earlier. And there's lots of different kinds of scooping sizes. There's a big scoop, little scoop, teeny little scoop. My favorite one for cookies this is a number 40, 40, okay, F40, where if you were to look at this one, this is a number 20. So this one is twice the size of this one. So we're going to use the number 40, and I'm just going to scoop it, and it's pretty flat, okay? And we're just making balls, okay, right now. That's all we're going to do. And I don't know if we'll make them all, but let's try to make as many as we can, because we have the big sheet pan, and they're going to take about 15 minutes. Bring us right to the end of our class, actually. So I don't know where the time goes, Wendy. I sometimes feel like I put too many things into the show that the time goes so fast, you know?
I understand. I think maybe it's the relationship with the beans. It interferes with our
so
relationship, and I've been
So
meaning
look
to
at,
talk
I'm
to you
just
about it.
rolling these, Wendy, just so you can see. I hope you can see.
Yep.
They're a little sticky. I mean, you could put a little bit of water on your fingers, but I find that you just have to live with a little bit of stickiness as possible. And I give them a little ball shape, and I'm basically covering them everywhere. Okay, so they're really getting coated in sesame seeds. Now, you could make some black cookies and not have them. I always like as much variation in cookies as possible. So maybe like when I make cookies with jam, I make it with apricot jam and raspberry jam. So you have orange and red. And we're going to almost do the same thing today once you see that I add the dried fruit. But we could make some cookies that are rolled in black sesame seeds, and we can have some cookies that are, and it's nice to kind of have a ball. It's going to be a rough ball, and I think we could get a few more onto the sheet pan before we get them in the oven. But let's just finish that like that right now, and that's looking really good. And I always like having baking on the demos so much. I love sharing the baking. Let's have some black sesame seeds too. Okay, and maybe we'll have the combo. Like I told you, we'll have a combo of black and white. And we're just again putting this not balls, but I'm scooping this so that it's flat. It looks like that. And I try to scoop as many as possible, bunch of them into the bowl, because once you get your hands dirty, right? Now there's probably another 6 cookies in here, but we're gonna not make them all. I'm gonna put this to the side for now. I'll finish it later, and then we're just gonna roll these in the rest of the sesame seeds. Oh, and I do like the black. It's super pretty. It's super pretty. I don't think you can see black on black dough here, but it's awfully pretty. And yep, they're going to look different than the other ones. And then what I do, you're going to see, but I have some dried fruit. Now you could use, if you have cranberries, you could use dried cherries if you want. But I recently bought these incredibly delicious dried plums. And I thought, well, while we're trying to make spooky treats and cookies, I thought, oh, the red plums would look great. And when I first made these cookies, I kind of followed the lead of Kathy. She used the fresh apricots. So the very first time I made them with just regular orange apricots. So that is this bowl. You have still some seeds. I'm going to put that aside for now, just over here. I'm going to rinse my fingers off. It's very sticky. And I'm probably overcooking our pumpkins, but that's okay for a moment. And we're going to get the cutting board. Oh, I'm going to get a newer cutting board. Sometimes I just do sweets on this little cutting board. And we're going to get a different knife. Now here are the plums, right? Here's the bowl of plums, dried plums, like that, and apricots. Okay, and what I'm going to do is quarter them. They're very round, and a quarter is plenty. Okay, just quarter. And I'm going to do the same thing to the apricots. Quarter them. And these are those orange, and you could use Turkish ones if you want. Those are very delicious as well. And again, any dried fruit, if you want. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to put this in the center, and then we're going to push it down, okay, so that it's flat. We're going to push this in the center and then push the cookie down. So the actual fruit gets pushed in and the cookie gets flattened to its round shape. And we'll make some with apricots. And I thought this is pretty much Halloween right here. Some orange and some red looking, blood looking kind of. And if the plums, these plums are actually a little bit big. So you could make them smaller if you want, but you really want to immerse the piece of fruit inside like that so that it actually, the cookie surrounded, the dough is surrounded, and that way that it doesn't pop out. And as you can see, each time I'm doing this, I'll just back this up just a little bit so you can see more. As every time I put the piece of fruit in, I'm slowly taking my fingers and just pressing the cookie down. Now these cookies need about 15 minutes to bake, 15 to 17 minutes. I'm put my fruit there, and we'll finish those. And those are gonna go right into the oven, just like that. Okay?
They look great. Carole, about what size are they? Are they like an inch or?
I would say that the scooper is about an inch, and let's just look at it. So it's about an inch and a quarter.
Yeah, nice.
So it makes a nice ball. I would say the size of a golf ball.
Beautiful. They're
But
really
you could make them any size you want. You know, if you're having little kids or party appetizer, you can make them really teeny. You know, that's the good thing about cookies. You can control their size. They could be gigantic, big round cookies. They could be, these I would say are kind of medium cookies, and they're about 4 bites. And I really think that's quite satisfying. You know, they're just about the right size. So I do want to get these in, otherwise we're never going to see them finished. And it's important for me to show them to you finished. So that's going to come out. These are going to go in, and we're just going to look at the time. And maybe they're going to come out, Wendy, when we're talking about the final things. For a very few minutes, I just thought we could talk about squashes and pumpkins because it is that time of year. And lots of people ask me about them. So I just thought we would go over some very, very basic things. Wendy, did anyone have any cookie questions before we move on to the next thing?
I think we're good to go.
Okay, good. And I'm going to stir the soup because we also have to make that. I want to get the immersion blender in there in a very few minutes. So that is happening. So, the pumpkins. We're not going to talk long about them, but I want to tell you they are not, I haven't read that they're a superfood, but they are such a great food for you. They are full of vitamins, phytonutrients. They are full of iron, a lot of vitamin A. And it says that if you can work in, sometimes vitamin A is very good for eyesight, but pumpkins are so good for you. So I think it's something that you almost have to work into your diet this fall if you're not used to eating them. And I get a lot of questions about pumpkins. So we're just going to go over some very basic things. This is a delicata squash, and it is really what its name is, delicata, meaning delicate. It is a wonderful a squash that you cut open going the long way, and I can bring the sheet pan here to show you how I cut it. So you see, let me just give me 1 second here. I'm just going to show you very quickly, that's very hot. But this squash, whoops, I kind of got it a little dark, but it would look like that, right? Look like that, so I cut it the long way. You can once you cut it, you want to take out the seeds. Let me get this knife here and just show you that when you cut it the long way, right? And you take out the seeds immediately. And you can cook the pumpkin seeds if you want. And I often just put them in a bowl, and then you have to put water, and you have to separate those seeds. It's a little bit of a pain, but you can do it. I don't always save them, to be honest with you, as much as I don't like wasting things. And then I usually take a measuring spoon, and I just clean out the seeds, right? I just clean them out. And I do that for every pumpkin. I always take the seeds out first. Okay, and then you take out the seeds, and then you usually want to cook it and roast it so it's face down, so it's up like this. Now, with these are very delicious if you actually cut them into half moons, and they're so delicate that you can actually eat their skins. This is one of the only skins that actually I think are pretty edible, because the skin is very thin, and I often take all of these, toss them in a little bit of aquafaba or citrus juice, and then I put them on the sheet pan, and then I roast them. And this particular delicata squash is delicious in green salads. That's the way I like delicata squash. You can also stuff it like you would a zucchini. That's fine too, or you could scrape it out. So that is the delicata squash. I'm just going to leave this one here. This is an acorn squash. It literally looks like an acorn, and you would cut it parallel going this way, and when it opens, you have a beautiful shape that almost looks like a heart. These are excellent for stuffing. Maybe you're thinking of stuffing a squash at Thanksgiving. This is a wonderful squash for Thanksgiving. And one of my favorite squashes is called a kombucha squash, pumpkin, kombucha. And sometimes it looks like it's got growing things on the outside. These come in green, and they also come in orange. And again, you would cut this going this way. You wouldn't cut it going the horizontal way. You would cut it directly in half parallel with the stem and take out the seeds. And all of these pumpkins, even I would say these two pumpkins and butternut squash, which I didn't bother to show you, but those are more common and orange and fleshy. They're the big ones that kind of look like a big shaped pear, small at the top and big at the bottom. That's the most common kind of squash. And in most grocery stores, they actually sell that already cubed and cleaned, which is, if you're really rushed, that's actually quite good to buy, that kind of squash. And the last one that I have here for you is what we call a spaghetti squash, which I super love only because it's fun. And I took out the seeds earlier, and what you do is once the squash is cooked, you actually take a fork and you just comb it like you're raking, if you were like raking. And this rake actually pulls up this beautiful stringy spaghetti, which is really can be used with the spaghetti. Instead of using pasta, you could absolutely eat this with your marinara sauce. So we did marinara sauce just a couple demos ago because I had a million tomatoes. But I want to show you something that I like doing is I often clean it out like that. Again, it's yellow, so it's not really great on the camera. But I kind of push it all to one edge, and I keep it in there. Now, again, it's really stringy. It's hard to see, but it's stringy. It tastes delicious. I want to just give it a taste. And what I do is I use this as a bowl, and I build like a quinoa bowl. So I actually take quinoa and I put a scoop of quinoa, I put some cooked broccoli, I put some cooked mushrooms or some kind of vegetable, and I actually build myself a bowl in the shell of the pumpkin. So that's a really fun thing to do and really easy, and then it's ready to go and it's self-contained. You haven't dirtied anything because the actual skin of the pumpkin is the bowl. And I don't usually eat the outside, but maybe you could, but it's not something I would do. So that is our just little demo on pumpkins. I only wanted to show that to you because I get questions about pumpkins, and I wanted just to give you an overall thing while we were doing Halloween thing. But let's finish up the soup. And Wendy, I'm sure people have questions about pumpkins. I mean, I can't imagine that they don't.
Well, the main question is, are you using the word pumpkin generically for all squashes?
Yes, yes. I mean, I call them pumpkins, but they are squashes. They're squashes, but they can be. This is the kabocha. Looks like a pumpkin. It's technically a squash because it technically a squash, but it. I kind of interchange the words pumpkin and squash.
Okay,
Because in my mind, a squash is a zucchini. Is a zucchini, but they are squashes of sort.
got it. And we do have a question, not so much about the squashes, but here it goes. I'm just going to read it to you. One of the viewers writes, I have seen date sugar sold in organic grocery stores. Date sugar, as you know, Carol, is made with dehydrated dates that are ground to resemble granulated sugar. Can this be substituted for date paste if you add water? I think with the
Um,
cookies, she's asking.
Yes, I don't know in these cookies, but I will tell you that I use date crystals I get my dates from this farm in California called Shields, and they actually make date crystals. And when I talk to them about the process, like how does that differ from date syrup or how does it differ from just dates? And they told me that they take the dates and they basically dry them out and then they just grind them up. So Shields actually has bags. You buy like a 2-pound bag, I think, or a 5-pound bag, and they actually tell you the proportion of water to add to those granules to make a date paste. You actually can make the date paste. Now, I have some date sugar that I occasionally use that I have bought just from the grocery store because it is just ground dates. And I use that like granulated sugar sparingly, but I don't think that it replaces date paste because date paste is actually, even if you put water in it, I just think it's a totally different texture, and I can't tell you what you'll end up with. I can't. I don't know. I use the date sugar, but I don't think it's a replacement for the actual whole date soaked in water because that is paste. When we're grinding it up, it's paste. And I think if you put that date sugar into water, it's going to become just disappear. The sugar is just going to become like syrup, like not syrup, but just sugar water. It's going to become sugar water, as if you were adding that to lemonade.
I would add that it's going to affect the consistency. And the other thing about the date paste using a whole date is that you'll get the fiber. And I'm not so sure that once the dates are dehydrated, you're actually taking out all the water in the
Correct.
dehydration process. And I'm not so sure if it holds the kind of fiber and water, which is what I've read, ultimately what the gut seems to be able to digest best.
I
In other
agree
words,
with
a
you.
whole
I agree
corn that has,
100%.
yeah, fiber and water. And for example, the suggestion is eating oatmeal cooked in water because you're keeping the fiber and you're rehydrating the oatmeal to fiber and water. So in general, I would recommend the dates over the dehydration, but as Carol said, you can do it. By the way, the noise in the background is Carol's lovely little dog. I'm sure she's okay.
She's just,
Carol,
so like wanting, she thinks I'm here to play with her all the time. And she was sleeping the entire day, Wendy. The entire day. I've been in the kitchen, and she's been in her little bed as if she's my sous chef, and she's been totally quiet.
so
But she
sweet.
has now woken up and said, I smell all this food. What's for me? And she's at my heels here, just wagging her tail, begging for
Well,
food.
you're getting
But I'm
questions
not going
whether
to
or
give it
not
to her.
she's okay. And I'm sure she's okay. Also, some of you may have noticed we've had a little bit of an internet um, uh, on and off with Carol earlier on, and there's also a lot of wind around, right, Carol, where you are right now. So her doggy may not just.
This is what we have to look forward to in our coming months of winter. I'm out on a ridge where big wind comes, 35-mile wind, and it really does affect our internet. So I apologize if there's been any issues, but I'm going to use the immersion blender this very second while I'm talking to you.
Okay,
and blend this up.
What was the name of the website for the date crystals that you mentioned?
Oh, it's called Shields. Shield, like a shield, like if you were to wear a shield and armor. SHIELD. Shields. And they're in Los Angeles. They're in outside of Palm Springs in Indio, I believe, California. And they have the best dates. And why do I know that? Because I have a friend that lives right there. And we always go, I get all my dates from there.
Great.
I took the bay leaf out, everyone. We need to finish up. I'm just seeing the time. And I'm just going to puree the soup. I'm not going to make it totally smooth, but I'm going to make it somewhat smooth. I don't like it too chunky. In black bean soup, for some reason, I like the carrots to disappear and the celery. I actually just like it to be black. Now we have to taste this soup as well to make sure it tastes good. Now sometimes I even add tomatoes, just so you know. I'm in the tomato mood because I've been canning tomatoes all this morning, and I'm just like, I think tomatoes need to go in everything. So I'm kind of leaving it a little chunky, but I have pretty much taken out, so you don't see any green peppers anymore. We don't see any of the carrots or the celery. And we're going to taste the soup, but we're also going to make sure that it tastes good before I go ladling it up. And, oh, Wendy, maybe you'll have to make your announcements eventually, and then we'll see about the cookies, because I know they're not quite done, but I want to show them to you when they're done, because they're very beautiful.
Great. I can go ahead and do that unless you...
But let me just finish the soup here for 1 second. What I'm going to do while you're making just the announcements is I'm going to squeeze a lime juice into the soup to kind of finish it off, right? And then I'm going to chop a little bit of cilantro for it. I'm not quite sure even. I didn't take out the cilantro because I kind of thought forgot about the cilantro. And I'm not sure how one forgets about the cilantro. But it definitely needs the lime juice to help finish it off. So we're going to use that. I'm just going to get rid of those. And we're going to make sure my spoon is clean. You never want to double dip. The soup actually tastes quite delicious already. And this is a kind of soup that I actually think is even better tomorrow. The longer it sits, the more the flavors meld. And it's quite tasty already. I don't think it needs anything. If you wanted it to be it's not even terribly spicy, which is good, but you can definitely know that the serrano chili's in there. And it actually tastes quite good already. And I'm going to get the cilantro while you're starting the announcements, but you're definitely going to come back so we can wrap things up.
Yes, I will go ahead and go back to where we were at the top of the show, because Plant Powered Metro New York has a number of activities coming up. Let me just see if I can find everything. So I'm going to start with the things this week, because we actually have some really fun stuff. I think on tomorrow we're having a potluck and recipe exchange. So that's online, and please go to our website. You can find out about it, and it's great meeting other people online and exchanging ideas. And then Tuesday we have our monthly book club, and I think this month it's on breast cancer. Next month is a very special event with the people who wrote Mastering Diabetes. So I realize I'm competing a little bit with Carole's cooking back there, but whatever. Announcements. This Thursday online, we have a Spanish-speaking cooking demo called the Fiesta Bowl Mexicano, and delightful chef Marielle Painter, and it looks like it's going to be delicious. And then we have a special event this Friday, October 28th, with a woman who is a board-certified American lifestyle medicine professional and nutritionist. Her name is Rohini Behakal, I think is how you pronounce it. And she's going to be talking about plant-based nutrition for polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then she and Carole on Monday, October 31st, so sorry for the mistake earlier, Monday, October 31st from 12:30 to 2:30, will be here in New York in person. Carole will be in New York, and they're going to do a 2-hour event on women's wellness, and they're doing nutrition for hormonal health. Plus, Carole is doing a plant-powered cooking demo and tasting based on some of the foods that Rohini will be discussing. So all kinds of issues about periods, menopause, polycystic ovary syndrome, all kinds of hormonal issues. And then in person in November, a Vietnamese dinner social in Astoria, Thursday, November 3rd. Caravan of Dreams is hosting another, or we're hosting with Caravan of Dreams, a fall social on Wednesday, November 16th. And then online, we have an event, Inflammation and Our Health, How Do Food and Gut Microbes Play a Part, Tuesday, November 1st at 7. Now, the person who was asking about miso, which is a fermented food, that may very well get discussed because of its beneficial aspects to the gut microbiome. So you may want to come to that. Inflammation and Our Health, How Do Food and Gut Microbes Play a Part, November 1st. We have for beginners that started with whole food plant-based nutrition on November 10th. Our book club, Mastering Diabetes, November 14th. And then we will once again host a virtual jumpstart. It's a 3 to 4 week program of taking people transitioning from a standard American diet into whole food plant-based. It's also good for people who just want to stay in the loop, be up to date with things. It's usually the newest nutritional research. So that'll be in January 2023, but we'll begin posting information on that late November. So that's a lot of things going on. Please go to the website. You can check them out and hope you can join us for all of them. We put recipes for those of you asking in the chat. And you can look also in the chat. These announcements of events are up there. And you can find us on plantpoweredmetronewyork.org, or you can connect with us on Facebook or on YouTube, and also on Instagram and Twitter at plantpoweredmny. And a huge warm thank you to somebody we just couldn't do without, our co-host and our producer, Jim Stellos. Also a thank you to Alan Smithy, who helps us behind the scenes. And our next demo with Chef Carole will be Sunday, November 24th at 5. We'll be doing a Thanksgiving. I think we're doing a Thanksgiving something, but it's Sunday, November 24th. And Carole can be reached at carole@thevegievanguard.com. She's also reachable on Instagram, which is at the Veggie Vanguard. So please consider a donation to Plant Powered Metro New York so we can continue doing our best work in communities. And Carole, are the cookies ready?
Oh my God, the cookies are ready. So this is what I've done. And they're already plated. And they look beautiful. And the plums have gotten a little dark. And everything looks great. And then what I've done with the soup, let me get the dog because she's barking like crazy. 1 second. Just wait 1 second. No, there's no reason to be barking like crazy.
Actually, while Carole is getting the dog, let me remind you, I totally forgot the plantathon. We have a huge plantathon going on, and I'm just waiting to hear from Jim what the date is. I believe it's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, Giving Tuesday. So it's probably around November. The Tuesday after Thanksgiving. Please join us for the Plantathon. It's fantastic. And yes, it's a fundraising event for Plant Powered Metro. Your funds help enormously, from the tiniest bit to big, large donations. So please consider. It looks like it's November 29th. So please join us. Mark your calendars. It's several hours with all kinds of distinguished people, and then everyday people like Carole and you and me, also giving information about plant-powered lifestyle. So please join us. Okay, Carole, back to you.
Okay, so let me just tell you, it's getting very windy and dark, and we have big black clouds, and it's starting to thunder. So we just finished just on time. What I did, and I want to tell you really quickly, is I roasted 3 red peppers in the oven until their skins were black. And then I just took the peppers and I put them in the blender, and I came up with this beautiful red sauce, which would be great on pasta, great on anything, to tell you the truth. And I just put some of that right in the middle of our soup. So here's our soup right here. You can see, and I put in a little roasted red pepper as a kind of touch of Halloween. And then often what I do is I almost always have some kind of tortillas, yellow ones, blue ones in my refrigerator. This time I do have some blue masa tortillas here. And usually what I do is I cut them into little straight lines, like little strips, and I put them on the sheet pan and I bake them. And they're delicious in the soup. So nice. Just take any kind of tortilla, cut it however you want into little triangles or into little pieces like julienne pieces. Put them in the sheet pan, let them get toasted in your oven, and then they're really delicious and crunchy in your soup. And I really love them that way. So I do encourage you to have the tortillas with the black bean soup because they kind of go together. And here's the dog, who's been just running around crying and now barking because of the thunder that's happening outside. But we're here all together.
How are the cookies? We have 1 minute to go.
Oh, they're done, Wendy.
Oh my God.
They are definitely done, and I even plated them.
I missed them. I'm so sorry. I was paying attention to chat, didn't even see them. Thank you.
It's okay. I took them out of the oven. The rest of them are on the sheet pan in the back. I still have a few more to make, and they are puffed up. They look beautiful. Look, they're so special. And I don't know if Kathy Fisher knows that I've changed up her recipe to make it my own cookie, but I love that you can take the same ingredients. One person could do one thing, and another person could do a whole totally different thing and turn it upside down.
Entirely true, and I know that you encourage people to play with recipes, so I think it's perfect that you do it yourself as well. And yeah, Aya is looking Isla,
yes,
very hungry, looking at your delicious food, as we all are.
And thank you so much for having a Halloween week with me. And I will hope to see many of you in person at Alchemy Salon, which is in Chelsea on 23rd Street near 6th Avenue. And again, it's kind of a double header about women's health and making little treats for us on Halloween Day. Not so much treats as we think of treats, but yummy food is what I mean by treats. I don't really mean like trick or treats kind of thing.
Wonderful, Carole. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's really a delight having you here. And happy cooking, and see you again either next month or at any of these other Plant Powered Metro New York events. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.